Ever since I was a kid, I've always loved Yu-Gi-Oh! For a little more than a decade, I've been a fan and a player of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game, and most people my age, it all started with the anime. The Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters anime is one of the most influential series to exist, and pretty much everyone knows the story by heart. Yu-Gi-Oh! Was written and illustrated by the late Kazuki Takahashi, serialized in Weekly Shonen Jump in 1996. Unlike the Yu-Gi-Oh! We know nowadays, where the series follows the iconic trading card game as its main focal point, the original vision of the series saw the main protagonist, Yugimoto, play various games ranging from rolling snake eyes to a Magic the Gathering-like card game. The series would shift from focusing on a variety of different games to focusing on that Magic the Gathering-like parody. That parody is now the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game. Ever since the change, Yu-Gi-Oh! Cemented itself as one of the three kings of trading card games, alongside Pokemon and the game it was a parody of from the very start, Magic the Gathering. What made Yu-Gi-Oh! Special in comparison to other trading card games was the story attached to the franchise, the iconic story of Yugimoto dueling against characters with varying stakes and iconic monsters. The Dark Magician, Blue Eyes, Red Eyes, the Egyptian Gods, Mirror Force, and all these cards the characters would use allowed for personal connection from that audience to that character, which is why most people gravitate towards the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Series. Most of the promotional material for the series harkens back to the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters anime, with new cards for the archetypes the characters would use. Of course, Yu-Gi-Oh! Isn't new to this so-called nostalgia pandering. Its contemporary Pokemon has been doing this for years. One of the most iconic Pokemon ever, Charizard, is shoved into every nook and cranny the franchise has to offer, much to the annoyance of the fans of that series. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is no different. In 2017, they released Yu-Gi-Oh! Dark Side of Dimensions. This movie is interesting to say the least, and I have a lot to say about this film. Today, we'll be asking the question whether or not this movie should exist.
A little joke for you. You love this one. Paranoid schizophrenic who walks into a bar.
Fair warning, this review will contain spoilers from the film. If you don't want to be spoiled, click off now and watch the movie, and then come back. But let's be real, this movie came out in like 2017 and it's already developed like object permanence by now, and by the time this video actually comes out, it would have already graduated from high school. So, you've been warned. With all that out of the way, let's begin this review. Yu-Gi-Oh! Dark Side of Dimensions was produced by Studio Gallop, the main studio behind the Yu-Gi-Oh! Franchise, and was distributed by Toei. Production for the movie was rocky to say the least. For one, the animation for the film was largely kept in-house. Now, that doesn't sound too bad until you realize the studio was working alongside two other weekly Yu-Gi-Oh! Series. Most of the staff worked on the film, while a skeleton crew was left for Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5 and Yu-Gi-Oh! Reigns, resulting in production issues for those series. As a result of the messy development cycle, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Franchise departed from Studio Gallop after the conclusion of Yu-Gi-Oh! Reigns and decided to venture on to greener pastures. Studio Bridge animates Yu-Gi-Oh! 7s, and any animation for the Yu-Gi-Oh! Franchise nowadays is produced by the Konami animation department. The writing and directing for the film was split between three people: Satoshi Kuwabara, the original director for Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexal; Masahiro Hikakubo, a Japanese screenwriter who worked with the franchise for decades; and the series creator himself, Kazuki Takahashi. The film acts as a continuation of the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga. If you're asking why the manga specifically, let me elaborate. The original Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime and manga have multiple differences between the two, and the most important difference for this video in particular has to do with the ceremonial duel between Atem, or the spirit of the pharaoh, and Yugi. While the duel remains the same, it's who's present that makes all the difference. In the anime, everyone was present for this duel. However, in the manga, the series' lead rival, Kaiba, was not present. In the anime, Kaiba acknowledges Yugi as the true king of games, and in the manga, Kaiba left without seeing the conclusion. So Already, we can see a huge divide between the two, where anime Kaiba accepts Yugi as the true king of games and moves on with his life, setting up major plot events for the Yu-Gi-Oh series, such as in GX, the sequel series to the original, with the construction of Duel Academy. The manga Kaiba we see throughout the film is bitter and unable to accept the Pharaoh's departure, even to a point where he creates a virtually identical copy of the Pharaoh and his deck.
Even his perfectly coiffed hair. In fact, that part is what took the longest.
All this is because of his inability to move on, and this is what drives the narrative, because this movie is all about one thing, and that is unfinished business. Every character in the film has something they're trying to move past from, but are left unable to move on. For Kaiba, it's the inability to move on from his former rival, the ability to even the score, and more importantly, the ability to see his friend for one last time. Because in the manga, Kaiba was never able to even the score and was left unable to say goodbye, leaving behind some regret. The movie opens up with an excavation team led by Kaiba in search of the Millennium Puzzle in the Pharaoh's tomb. Immediately, we transition to meeting Yugi and the gang with updated character designs. What's really cool is that we happen to get the original dub voice actors for these characters, like Dan Green for Yugi and the iconic Eric Stewart for Kaiba, who pretty much carried this entire movie. Seeing as how this is a Kaiba movie after all, it's like being hit with a time capsule of the early 2010s with these iconic dub voices. The movie makes no delay to showcase the future plans of the cast, with Taya going to New York and follow her dream of being a professional dancer, Tristan having to work in his dad's factory after graduation, Joey wanting to be a pro duelist, and Yugi's goal of creating a game that everyone can play. Throughout the film, Yugi struggles to move on with his life after the ceremonial duel, which is understandable considering this movie canonically takes place 6 months after the original series, and that really isn't enough time for someone to just move on. For Yugi, it's like losing a family member, because realistically speaking, a Tem was pretty much one, since he's been there since the very beginning and arguably has more screen time than Yugi himself in the original series. Now, this wouldn't be a Yu-Gi-Oh movie without the titular movie-only bad guy, Diva, who despite not being evil, serves as the antagonist throughout the film. He has the power to snap people out of existence, thanks to the Plana, a mystical power to bend reality to one's will, given to him by Shin, and is actively trying to prevent Kaiba from resurrecting the Pharaoh, because if the Pharaoh were to return and then leave to the afterlife, bye-bye magic powers. The film treads alongside these three major characters, like the triangular shape of the Millennium Puzzle. Kaiba's trying to bring back the Pharaoh, Diva is trying to stop Kaiba, and Yugi's just trying to move on from a ceremonial duel. All these tangle together in duels against one another, and it's rushed, to say the least. The film tries to intertwine all three of these narratives together through dueling. However, it's rushed because of the runtime given. It has to jump from point to point and interrupt the duels in progress just to keep the narrative moving forward. This movie has like 5 duels and 2 of them had to be cut early so the plot can continue to chug along. However, despite that, the duels displayed throughout the film are animated spectacularly and are the main highlights of the film. I mean, come on, it's a Yu-Gi-Oh movie, for crying out loud. One of the most important aspects of a Yu-Gi-Oh film is to have strong and engaging duels, and one reason that these duels are so engaging is because of the updated cards the characters would use. Because let's be real, if Yugi and Kaiba were dueling with their old cards, then the 2 hours this movie would take up would be like half an original series duel. With the introduction of these new cards, it also highlights the character struggles throughout the film. If we look at it narratively, in the film, Yugi utilizes mostly new cards with some old staples like Dark Magician and Dark Magician Girl, which signifies his struggle to move on. He can't stop thinking about his old friend, as evident with the Dark Magician cards he possesses. Diva has the power of the Plana, which grants him the ability to reshape the world around him. So how would you incorporate this ability into the movie? Well, you would do this with the introduction of dimension summoning. So the movie implements this new summoning method. You summon monsters using spirit energy, and that energy charges up the attack and defense points as long as it doesn't exceed the original attack and defense of that monster. That is implemented to speed up duels, but also highlights Diva's otherworldly power. Kaiba largely uses the same strategy of summoning his high attack monsters, mostly his blue eyes cards, signifying his inability to move on. The best example is his duel against Diva, where Kaiba literally just pulls a destiny draw and just summons an Egyptian god card. And everyone is just shitting themselves like, how the fuck did Kaiba do that? How he just summoned that? And then he just activates Obelisk's ability. Gonna be honest, that is straight hype, and also adds to the fact that Kaiba is just so ingrained into his past, plays a card that he used to use and is supposed to be gone from existence canonically. The plot jumps from Yugi hanging out with the gang in Domino City to Kaiba in Egypt. And as Kaiba finds the Millennium Puzzle pieces, Diva shows up from the shadows and begins to challenge Kaiba to a duel. Kaiba pretty much whoops Diva's ass, and before the duel is finished, it's interrupted as the final pieces of the puzzle are found, and Diva steals 2 pieces to prevent Kaiba from assembling the full puzzle. And since the puzzle is back, guess what? The Millennium Ring is back as well, yay! And still possesses the ability to turn the wearer evil, which doesn't make sense because the reason the ring was evil in the first place was because Zork was sealed inside of it. And Zork was wiped in the original series, but you know, when you clean something with Clorox, you only remove like 99.9% of germs. I guess it only removed 99.9% of Zork, and that 0.1% remained, which is why the ring is still evil, I guess. Diva meets up with Bakura and Joey, and guess what? They got bamboozled, and Diva sends Joey and Bakura to another dimension, so Diva can enact some type of punishment for the both of them, even though Joey literally didn't do anything wrong and actively went out of his way to defend Diva. And Bakura isn't possessed by the ring anymore, so as Diva begins to hesitate about enacting some type of punishment for Bakura, a ring-possessed Manny shows up, only to reinforce this notion that Bakura was never evil in the first place, and it was all because of the ring's influence that he did the evil things that he did. Anyway, we see Diva's backstory where Master Shin talks about why he kidnaps children because they aren't blinded by fear or whatnot. You know, the whole Star Wars fear leads into hate type speech, the sort of indoctrination the North Korean government does to children. So because Diva fears losing his powers, he hates anyone who opposes him. Yeah, sounds reasonable if I had the ability to wipe anyone I don't like from existence. So while Bakura's being PTSD mindfucked, Joey is having his memories erased, and when he thinks all is lost, he remembers the Pharaoh and just exits out of the dimension Diva sent him. Diva is captured by Kaiba's Delta Squad, and while he's all smug, he soon becomes a crying Wojak behind a smug mask. As it turns out, his sister Sarah betrayed him, and now Kaiba knows the location of the other Millennium Puzzle piece. Kaiba knows everything that goes on in Domino City. He holds a tournament for the last 2 pieces of the puzzle. Yugi defeats Diva in a duel and recovers the other puzzle piece, and now it's a duel against Yugi and Kaiba. Despite having all the pieces together, much to Kaiba's disappointment, the Pharaoh has not returned. Before the duel is finished, it's interrupted by a ring-possessed Diva, and I gotta say, I really love this design. It's creepy, it's eldritch, it pretty much harkens back to the original Yu-Gi-Oh series, because nowadays, Yu-Gi-Oh villains are either cyborg abominations or they fuse with a dragon, so it's really cool and interesting to see something so eldritch in nature, and it's almost fresh and unique. Kaiba loses all of his life points in the duel and doesn't feel so good, so when Yugi's about to fall, the Pharaoh returns and just destiny draws his way to victory. The animation, the music, the tone, it's all so hype, but in retrospect, it kinda just spits in the face of all of Yugi's development. The ceremonial duel and the majority of this movie are about Yugi trying to move on and to become his own person outside the shadow of the Pharaoh. But nope, this movie's all like, fuck all that, and brings back the Pharaoh, which was kinda obvious in hindsight considering the only way that the Plana could lose their power is if the Pharaoh were to return, so realistically, his return was inevitable. The movie ends with the gang graduating from high school and going off in their separate ways, and Kaiba visits the realm of the afterlife via the dual disc technology and shows up to duel against Atem, and that is the end of the movie. Although in my personal opinion, that's not the end of the original series. In an Instagram post created by Kazuki Takahashi, we can see Kaiba and Yuki playing a new game with a post that reads, "Since graduation, 4 years have passed, and Yugi, as expected, wins at a world game contest and begins walking the dream path of a game creator. Yugi's game is given a high valuation, so What ends up happening, Kaiba Corporation embarking on a joint development. Yugi's invented sphere-faceted model fighting game, Spherium 2 prototype model, is complete. So right now, Kaiba and Yugi commence the fight on the stage of space. From now on, Yugimoto becomes the new Yugioh Game King, has departed for his goal, and this is one possible future story. Thanks for cheering on Yugioh, the movie this year. It's great to have drawn an illustration for what Yugi's prospective future felt like together with Kaiba. Now, for the most important question of this video. Was this movie necessary? The answer is no. Nearly a decade after this film has been released, it realistically shouldn't exist. There's a plethora of continuity issues throughout the film, like how is the ring still possessed when Zork is gone? How did Joey get his dual disc taken away when we literally see him cycling around with it within the first opening moments of the movie? Why did the Pharaoh need to come back? Why did Shin not tell anyone about the Plana? You would think that's a major plot point considering these kids can literally fucking Thanos snap anyone out of existence. In conclusion, this movie did not need to exist. The entire plot centered around the manga's version of the ceremonial duel, which is why it confused the fuck out of me when I first watched it, and a lot of people. Because being realistically honest, casual viewers would be lost as fuck because most fans watch the anime and haven't read the manga. Most reviews online give the movie about a 6 out of 10 for reasons I've stated previously. So I'm feeling a light 6 on this LP. It's kind of weird looking back on this movie considering this was meant to be a momentous occasion for the Yu-Gi-Oh franchise and it's nearly a decade later. So what will the franchise have in store for the 30-year anniversary? Who knows, really?